Hello, travelers. Welcome to Reach the World's Explorer program. For over 20 years, Reach the World has inspired youth to become curious, confident, and compassionate global citizens through virtual exchange. My name is Tim, and I'm so glad you're joining us for today's live stream event. We're looking at a different side of the Mount Everest experience today, and for that reason, I am so excited to welcome today's special guest, explorer and filmmaker Nate Menninger. Nate's going to show us what it's like to be a porter on Nepal, one of those critical jobs that keeps supplies and everyday life moving in this mountainous region with very, very few roads. He's personally experienced this in a rather unique way, and I'm going to stop there and let him tell you more about it. But as sort of a reminder before we get started, this is the third live stream event of Reach the World's Expedition to Everest virtual exchange. If you are a K through 12 educator who'd like to follow this entire virtual exchange live with your students, I'll add a free registration link below in just a moment. But without further ado, it's time to travel virtually again to the Himalayas. Nate, welcome to Reach the World.
Hey there, Tim. Thanks for having me. And I've heard that you guys have already talked to a bunch of Everest summiters, so I think that's awesome. I did not summit Everest, but I do have some other information, some other stories I can hopefully share with you guys to help paint a picture of what's going on over there. So,
yeah,
thanks for having me.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. Even though you did not summit Everest, you have a very unique perspective on a part of the sort of community around and on Everest that is critical to humans' survival in that very difficult place to survive. Maybe you could start off by telling us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and what made you interested in the Everest region.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Nate Menninger, or Nathaniel James, if you want to say the middle name. I don't know why you would do that. But I grew up playing sports. Sports were all that mattered to me. So I'm sure you guys are playing sports now in high school and middle school and even elementary school. For me, that's all I loved. And I went to university and played sports in university. And I did study, but I probably should have done some more studies. And eventually I, instead of doing just other types of jobs, I really wanted to explore the world after. I had a very adventurous spirit, and I really wanted to, dive into different cultures and speak different languages and explore things that I didn't know about, because I came from an area that was very, it was like one group of people. It was diverse, but people's economics backgrounds and things like that weren't as diverse, and I didn't see as much as I wanted to. So I wanted to go travel the world, eat cool food, snowboard, awesome places, and experience as much as I could. And so I did that for a while, and eventually went to Nepal the first time because I wanted to do a crazy project and swear to noble silence. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but I didn't really know what it was. I just figured it was not speaking for a long time and living in a temple like monks in movies. And I left for Nepal, and that was the first time I went. And after that, I had been back another time, and I worked there, and I just kind of fell in with some people. And it seemed like I was a writer my whole life, and it seemed like I didn't think my books would sell if I couldn't prove them. I'm like you guys, I need to see visual proof. I didn't read much, and I love videos. So I figured, okay, I need a video. And then because I had met some people in Nepal, I thought, what would be a really crazy thing to do? What could get me famous? What could get me famous? That's all I wanted. And well, I could climb Everest as a porter. And so if you've spoken to these Everest summiters, you might, or if you've seen photos, you've probably seen people carrying equipment, carrying bags for people who are climbing, people who pay money. And you guys might, I don't know what the other people told you, you might have heard of these workers as Sherpa, but what people don't necessarily know is that in Nepal, there are something called ethnic groups. And it's basically, this is really just one way of saying it. It's like a bunch of people share a last name. So it's like, if my name's Menninger, there's thousands of Menningers, and we're all part of one ethnic group. So Sherpa is actually just one ethnic group. It's one last name. And there's tons of last names. right? And they all come from different places. And the actual job of carrying equipment is not a last name, it's actually a porter, just like someone who carries your hotel bags in a hotel or at a rail station. There's a bunch of different types, but it's someone who carries things, and it's called porter. Mm-hmm. And Sherpa often work as porters, and that's why they're called Sherpa. But any person can be a porter.
Okay.
So that clarifies it.
Yeah, thank you. Can you explain why the job of a porter is so important in and around Mount Everest?
Yeah, of course. So people don't really know, but Everest is just one little slice of the pie, and even I didn't really know this before I went. But in Nepal, there's like a 1,000 or so people that climb Everest, but there's almost 100,000 other people that go into the Himalaya in Nepal alone to go to other mountains and they call it trekking, which is just basically walking around in the mountains and hiking, and they stay in different places, and mostly everywhere they go, there aren't roads, so you can't get things to these hotels, and they're called tea houses where you stay overnight, that you'd want. A lot of, we call them clients or tourists, want Pringles or Coke or internet or, things like that, rice even. And you can't just magically get this into the mountains. There's no roads. You're not going to use a helicopter. So you either need animals, and you put it on the backs of animals, and you yell at the animals and you drive them towards where you're going, or you carry it on your back. And so this is what, it's not just the job of a porter, but almost everyone growing up in the countryside of Nepal and in India as well grows up with something called a namlo, which is like a rope around your forehead, and you put a bag on it and you carry stuff, equipment, toilet paper, whatever you need, like that. And it's kind of like it's just like a rite of passage. Like everyone would have an namlo and carry their goods like that. And so you really need workers to transport goods, not only to carry equipment for foreigners, like their luggage and their clothes and stuff like that, but also to bring doors and cement and things to build houses, So even if you don't hire a porter and you go on an adventure in the mountains, every hotel you stay in, all the food you eat was brought there by workers. Wow. So they really form the foundation of all the tourism in the mountains, not just in Nepal, but all around the world where there's big mountains that people visit. So
amazing. You wrote in your Reach the World article that you were the first American porter, the first American to do that job that you're aware of. Why is it unusual to have people outside of Nepal doing that job?
Oh yeah, no one does that job. I think there was one British person who did it for a little bit, and there was one Canadian as well. But I think that's it. People like, it's a very, very hard job. Every job is hard, but this one is like, you sleep on the floor, you don't eat a lot of food, you have to carry, maybe 40, 60, sometimes even 225 pounds on your back with your neck, so it's not a job that people really want to try, plus it's very difficult. So foreigners don't do it. Also, the pay is really, really, the money is very, very bad. So yeah, I did it more so for like journalism, to share a story.
Mm-hmm. I've got some of your pictures that you shared ready to show here, and I'll bring those up. I wonder if you could talk us through these pictures, just sort of help us understand what it's like to work as a porter in Nepal.
Yeah, for sure. So this picture is actually before we left. So I wanted to make a movie, right? But I never really made a movie. So it took a lot of learning to figure out what you have to do. And it's good because, like, if I could do it, you guys can do it. If you have an idea to do something that you don't really know how to do, if you just dive in and try, you know, you can do it. It will be hard, you know, you'll have to learn a lot and battle with that. But this picture at the beginning is before we left, and we had to put everything we needed for the film out on the beds, you know, and I was working with a cinematographer who knew a lot about film, and I had to have the right clothes because I wanted to wear like similar clothes to what someone would have if they worked this job. I didn't want to have like luxuries. I didn't want to have things that they couldn't have. So I would only drink tap water, which isn't always healthy there. And I wouldn't have Coke. You know, I really wanted Coke. I had to eat a lot of salt. So in Nepal, it's a salt, in the mountains, it's a salt-based diet. So what that means is instead of all the sugar we eat in America, you eat a lot of salt. Like you literally put salt in your tea, which is a very unique flavor. But if you eat enough salt, it helps your body retain water and you don't sweat as much. So
All right.
I was sweating a lot and they weren't. But anyways, this picture is just the night before we were about to set out to walk our way to Mount Everest. Oh, this is that is what it's called, a body, which is BADI, and it's basically your bag. And this is a porter's bag, and this one is massive. And you can see the toilet paper, and I believe these other ones might be boxes of beer or things like that. So these are things that all the tourists, and there's so many tourists when you get there during the crowded season, they're going to want to, after their long day of trekking and hiking, they're going to want to crack open a Coke or some type of beverage and relax. And so this guy probably got paid by a hotel to transport all these goods for the tourists and other people there, maybe even locals too. And so that little, I wish I could point it out, but you see that like white cloth in the middle?
Mm-hmm.
That pulls out and then wraps around your forehead, and your back goes against this basket, right?
Okay.
And then you lean forward with the white rag over your forehead, and all this 100 kilos, 225 pounds, and you lean forward and it falls on your back, and then you have to stand up and you walk really slowly because it hurts. And this is how it balances, and you do the whole thing with your neck. You know, you don't have shoulder straps like we do on backpacks. So
amazing.
This was the first day we were going from this place called Lukla. I don't know how much you guys have learned, but Lukla is like Kathmandu is the capital of Nepal, and you can fly from Kathmandu to the mountains, right? And that mountain city is called Lukla, and then you hike another 20, 40 miles to Everest. Or you can walk the whole way, take a bus and walk. We walked, but anyways, Lukla is where you really start the job. That's where tourists arrive usually. And on the first day, you just go 7 or 8 kilometers, 7.8 kilometers. And this was on the way, and we were resting, and I was in a lot of pain. My neck hurt so much because I never carried a bag using my neck, you know? So my bag's in the middle, and the two men by my side are the fellow porters. We had 3 porters on our group, and the one on the left is named Jibantamang, and on the right Sukratamang, and they were like my guides. They let me work with them, which is incredible. They helped me tie my stuff and figure it out, and they waited when I was like dying behind them. So they were awesome, and I owe them a lot.
Right.
Yeah, this is just kind of a beautiful shot. I mean, see that mountain on the right is called Ama Dablan, and it's pretty much like, I think it's the most beautiful mountain in this part of the Himalaya, and I think that's called, like, they refer to it like God's light, because when you're in this town below it and the light hits it, it is like so unbelievably beautiful. And if I were to ever climb another mountain, I'd climb that one just because it's like looks so cool. But this is just taken from a nearby city on our way to Everest Base Camp, and it's a nice day, and yeah, just people walking around. Acclimatizing is what it's called. It's when basically, because the altitude is so high, and they probably already learned, you guys probably already learned from the others, but you have to go up to get stronger and then sleep lower it's kind of like when you lift a lot of weight, you lift and then you rest, and then you lift more and then you rest. This is the same thing, except with your lungs.
Okay, yeah, we've talked quite a bit about the death zone on Everest and, some of the even higher altitudes, but it's a good thing to remember that even as you're just like approaching the base camp of Everest and the mountains around, you're still at a very, very high altitude, and it takes a toll on your body, especially when you're being asked to carry so much weight.
Yeah, it does. Luckily, we had walked a long way in, so we weren't that affected, but people who fly in aren't that adjusted. You're just like, if you fly to the top of Everest, it's not going to be as easy if you walk and you build the muscles and you adjust. So we have to, take days off and rest. Yeah. So this is just, as you're walking, you rest, you're with your other porters who are working for other expeditions. There's so many different expeditions in the mountains at the same time. People going to Everest, people going to that mountain I mentioned, Amadablan, people going to a lake, people just going to a city to relax. And all the time we carry their bags and we rest along the way. So I'm on the right and I'm just resting with some other people. And that bag that brown box on the left, on top of his bag, if you can see it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but we had one on ours, and it's actually fresh fruit brought all the way from Kathmandu, a long way away, just so that tourists can have an apple or banana when they are almost at Everest, which is just, insane. But that's the type of stuff companies like to do to make sure their tourists are happy. Yeah, this is a photo shoot. The cinematographer I was working with was like, we need a photo shoot, So I went over and posed. And I'm not the best model, but it felt weird too, because I'm like, I just don't really do that. And so I just kind of sat there and he took a photo. And
this is a good view, though, of the strap you're describing that would go up over your forehead, onto your forehead, and support that whole pack on your back, correct?
Yes, sir. And that's why I have a hat on, because it hurt a lot. And the hat kind of cushioned the blow. So I would roll the hat back and sometimes the hat would fall. And yeah, it was, I wore those clothes for, I think I wore the same shirt for like 23 days and I didn't shower for 23 days. And I wore the same underwear for a long time. So
is 23 days sort of an average round trip journey into the mountains and back to Lukla, or was that unique to you?
The average trip is 12 days from Lukla, that city, to Everest Base Camp and back. But if you hike instead of fly, then you have to add on a bunch of days. And then when you're coming back, instead of flying back, you hike again, you have to add more days. So I wanted to do it like a porter would, and a porter wouldn't necessarily spend that money on a flight. So we didn't do that. Oh yeah, this is dope. We were coming from Everest and it was snowing. I already fell like 3 times. And there was no one anywhere. And you're in the middle of the mountains and it's just a really cool moment. The 3 of us kind of taking a picture, like, here we are carrying bags, working in the middle of the mountains in the snow, quiet, no one around. It's harsh conditions, but at the same time, it's kind of beautiful.
Can you describe sort of the camaraderie of working with people who are all doing something very difficult in such a unique place? What were your relationships like with some of the other porters as you were making this journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I'll relate back to sports. I don't know how many of you guys play sports, but when you have to do sprints or when you have to do, some difficult task, even group work in school, you kind of bond together over how hard it is. And so it's a very hard job. Not only because you're carrying bags, but because you're making very little money. And some days you have to spend a lot of more money than you make. You don't eat very much. You sleep usually in the same bed as other people, sometimes on the ground. So it's very hard, and that's something everyone accepts. And so what do you do when something's very hard and you're in it with other people is you grow much closer with the people you're with. You're sleeping with them, you're talking with them. So you might not always talk. A lot of the times it's quiet. People, it's hard. People are kind of like, dreading the next day. But at the same time, you're in it together, and there are moments when you laugh and you sing and you smile, and a lot of the little things become important. And just the time when you're sipping tea after a long day, you get a free cup of tea at a hotel and you're sitting with other people drinking, and it's quiet, it just becomes something that bonds you together. And so, you have to help each other out. If someone falls, you have to be there, so you're kind of a team. And yeah.
Okay, I have two questions that may seem obvious to you, but I think will help clarify parts of this job for U.S. audiences. Number one, what language are porters speaking while they're on the trail to and from Everest?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier the idea of ethnic groups. So in Nepal and in India and probably in China, at least in Nepal, every ethnic group usually has its own language. So Sherpa, and this is not Nepali. Nepali is the national language of Nepal, but not everyone speaks it. And even those who speak it often speak the language of their ethnic group as well. So like most people in Nepal speak at least 3 languages, and they speak their ethnic group language, then Nepali, and then often English. But if you really want to work well, you have to learn German, maybe Russian or Spanish. It depends on who you want to guide. So a lot of people know those many languages, and also Hindi, because all the TV is in Hindi. They have Bollywood, if you've ever heard of that. They don't do Hollywood as much. So we spoke Nepali, but I'm sure others spoke their dialects as well at the same time. So,
okay, great. And the second question is, what you've just described is a very difficult job that doesn't pay very well. Why do so many people do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. People need work at the end of the day. The truth is, the job has a long history that is not the best of histories. So I worked with Tamang ethnic group, and a long, long time ago, the government, they said Tamang are slaves, and one of the jobs slaves did was carry equipment for the government when they wanted to become a bigger country, And so over time, this job grew and grew, and they eventually earned some money, but they don't earn much money. They earn very little money. And it's very hard to work other jobs because you might live in the mountains. You might not be educated. You might not have the money to get educated to get a different job. And this is available to work today. So you work it because sometimes it's all you can do. It's all that's available given your resources. And but no one wants to be a porter for life. That's I don't think that's what people want. If it paid better, maybe. I like to say every job is hard, but you should never be earning less than you spend in a day. And there are days when that happens.
Yeah, this is our last photo that I wanted to share. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the results of your filming project.
Yeah. I feel weird like talking all this much, but It's nice to be here. So we had, after I made the movie, I wanted to share it obviously with as many people as I could. And that's very hard. I don't know if you guys know, but well, I just imagined you make the movie and you just get, millions of views the next day. But that's just not how it works, Maybe you go viral, but with a movie like this, you have to like have a marketing campaign. So you have to essentially work very hard and send many emails to sell your documentary. And so I felt like there was a real issue here and I wanted to go to schools. So I started going to like climbing gyms and saying, hey, if you show my film and I'll speak at your gym, and kind of getting 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 10. And then from there, going to bigger mountaineering clubs. So like BMC stands for the British Mountaineering Council. So we got there, and then Arc'teryx. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's a clothing brand. So you go from, climbing gyms to mountaineering groups to clothing brands, and then you have universities. So you see the University of Virginia, and we went to many different universities. And in the end, the film did really well. We went to we got on CNN, which was like wild. And we created an initiative with there's something called the International Climbing and Mountaineering Federation. I don't know if you guys have learned about that before, but it's basically like, if you ever heard of the United Nations, it's the United Nations of all of trekking and mountaineering in the world. Mm-hmm. So in Peru, Tanzania, places like that, this group, the international group, makes regulations, has events, things like that. They liked my film, and together we launched an initiative to try and help, these problems go away all over the world. And so that was because of the film. And so the film did really well in that way.
It's amazing. We have shared your film is available on YouTube, and we've shared the link to the film on the Reach the World virtual exchange homepage, a link to which I put at the bottom of the screen right now. So anyone who wants to watch it, is inspired by what you have told us about, is welcome to do that. What do you hope will be the impact of your film? I've just looking through the comments people have made on YouTube and elsewhere about your film. I see messages from porters in the porter community in Nepal saying, thank you so much for telling our story. Like what must be very gratifying messages in that way. What do you hope would be the long-term result of making this film and telling this story?
Yeah. Number one, if you guys don't want to watch the movie, you don't have to. I like explosions and stuff like that. So, that's fine if you don't want to watch it. And I think my goal, I could just tell my story at the end of the day. I can't really speak for them, but I think the economics have to change, because it's just not fair, like, I don't want to fight for anyone. I don't want to be anyone, like that for someone else. But if something's unfair, that information needs to be shared and changed, because that's not right. If you have to go to school for 20 hours a day, every 5 to 6 days a week, and you don't get lunch, that's not fair. So that needs to change. And then the second thing is, if you guys ever do travel, and not just internationally, but really anywhere in the country, it takes time, and it took me a long time to realize like what your actions do. So if you spend really little amount of money trying to do something that everyone else pays more for, you might spend a little and get away with it, and maybe you don't have any more money. I've done this. But if a lot of people do this, it can change the industry so that, companies will continue to charge less and less and less and less. And it's the idea that if you go somewhere, you think that the government, the town, the city, the museum, whoever it is, they're responsible for all the pay here, for all their workers. And people will say this about Everest, it's the Nepal, they're called outfitters, the companies that that set the prices and everything. And it's true, they set the prices, but people only set the prices because of what people pay. So the truth is, foreigners, tourists, people visiting anywhere are one half of the equation for the sustainability of the place, the museum, whatever it is you're going to. So I I wouldn't have gotten this when I was younger, but I was kind of dumb in a lot of ways. So I would just say, realizing that you're more powerful than you think, and that like every not every decision, you don't want to get, too into it, but your decisions like can really change the system, and even just like talking with one person and like being like, hey, this is what's going on, this is what I'm doing, I don't want to do that, can actually slowly help. So
Okay. Yeah. Great. When you think back sort of on this whole experience of going to Nepal and experiencing what it's like to be a porter, it was obviously a very difficult experience for you. Do you have any moments that stand out as just real highlights from that time in the mountains?
I mean, finishing was pretty nice. Putting the weight down and being done, and finally having footage of what I do and having my work advance. That was pretty nice. There was one time when we were in the mountains, when we were just outside of Everest. It was really cold, and people were sick, and we started singing, and a fellow porter picked up the camera and started filming us, and it was just like, we just felt like more of a family than I ever had. And there was some other things, if you watch the movie, that are just good moments. But yeah, I don't think, what stands out to me is that it's a hard job. And like the main thing is, this is kind of separate, I'm going off here, but like if I would walk away with one thing, it's that I wanted to become famous. Like I grew up in the same world you guys do. In fact, you guys grow up even more, but fame was everything. Like how do you get famous? Red Bull had just started, and how crazy of things could you do? And I really wanted that. And then I did this project because it sounded really out there. People don't do this job, as I explained, and it's really hard. So I thought it would be good on camera. And I ended up, walking into an issue of this post-slavery world. I'm like coming from America in a different country, and it was a whole lot of real issues that I wasn't ready for. Mm-hmm. And that changed me a lot, so I wanted to become famous the whole time, even after, but I felt really bad. I felt like, I just kind of walked into these people's lives. They can't leave with a camera to make my career and my life the next level, and then left. And I was like, whew, that's not a great move, mm-hmm. But I did it.
Well, I hope that the impact of your film, which anybody who's watching can certainly check out, and I'd highly recommend you check out for the full story, is a net positive on the porter community. Certainly an interesting portrayal of what that experience is like. And this has been such a really interesting and thought-provoking conversation, Nate. Thank you so much for joining us. Students, if you haven't already read Nate's article about his experiences as a porter in Nepal, make sure you head to the Expedition to Mount Everest Virtual Exchange homepage and check it out. And with that, I want to just thank you again, Nate, for joining us. Everyone else, stay tuned for more from the Expedition to Mount Everest Virtual Exchange, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Nate.
Thanks, guys. Feel free to reach out if you ever want to.